So if you could close the door, I mean, we can start. I mean, it has been a very interesting morning this morning. I mean, today is session 5, Building Livable Cities. And I'm not going to reveal anything on livable cities, but I have to reveal how to connect Søren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher, and Steve Jobs, the American icon. I mean, they are, you know, they told me, I mean, to dream and to dream big, I mean, but I let you connect the dots. I mean, the quote is here, I mean, and it's one of the most famous quotes by Steve Jobs, I mean, and it's bringing, to a certain extent, a new light. I mean, now that you know that, as Søren Kierkegaard said, life should be lived forwards but understood backwards, and the quote, I mean, is really, you cannot connect the dots looking. It's too small there. I mean, let me just, apologies, I mean, for, you cannot connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in the future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. This approach has never let me down, and it has made all of a difference. So without further ado, I mean, we will be having here Katja Wiltoft, an architect from JJW Architects Copenhagen, who will be connecting the dots for the next session. So please, the floor is yours. Thanks a lot once again.
Thank you. Well, actually my role is just connecting the dots, because the speakers are sitting here and they will bring, as we hope, very interesting ways of introducing how the livable cities, the sports and the health can be combined and exactly give us the possibilities in the cities that we need. Because we all know that there are immense problems to be solved, but the physical surroundings bring the possibility of some of the solutions. And today it will be maybe not a battle, but a discussion between 3 great cities. And I will start with the biggest one. I will start in New York City. And the first speaker will be Bryan Ross, Strategic Initiatives Director of the Center of Active Design in New York. Bryan Ross is in charge of the Fitwell and the Center of Active Design. And I think this is what we will hear a lot more about. And he oversees special projects, partnerships to amplify the mission of transforming real estate practices to promote health. And I know that Bryan will also address health in a broader view. And we're looking very much forward to that. So, Bryan, please.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you to the Smart Cities and Sport Network and all the organizers for hosting me. Before I forget to say this, in my line of work, the dots are data. So I think that's what I'm going to spend some time talking on today. Thank you for allowing me to share my organization's perspective and work. Greetings from New York, though I live in Paris, a bit of a whisper there, but I live in Paris, but I represent an organization based in New York, and we have this saying in English, always the bridesmaid, never the bride, in terms of Olympics. So maybe one day we'll host, but not yet. I have a urban planning background. I think my bias comes across very clearly in the slides I'm about to share. So that's the perspective I bring to our organization, but we are interdisciplinary. We have architects, urban planners, public health researchers, communications experts, all kind of coming together in this mission to transform real estate development practice. So we are in this wonderful mecca of urban planning. The concepts displayed here on the streets and in the public spaces in Copenhagen are absolutely stunning. I'm thrilled to be here. When I usually speak to groups on this topic, it's to engineers, designers, and architects, so I am really fortunate to have the ability to actually speak to people who are sort of behind the scenes, the thinkers and influencers behind such key decisions in cities across the world. We have such a potential to make a meaningful impact and a lasting impact for residents and deliver enhancements to their communities. Those enhancements can impact their health, their quality of life, and can also really rev up economic activity. So just thinking about the name of this Congress for Smart Cities, the point of view I bring to this discussion is that SMART is about turning over a century of health data into really useful information and guide points to help us make investing and implementation in cities really actionable and evidence-based. The big green one, that should have been obvious. So, while we're in Copenhagen, much of the world looks like this. We've got significant work to do. I think this imagery summarizes life for many of us. It certainly summarizes my upbringing in the American suburbs. There's infrastructure lacking. There's sidewalks to nowhere. If you have them, by chance, you might have a sidewalk that just suddenly ends. The primacy of the automobile is clear. The inability to do anything, go anywhere without owning a car is really the reality for so many people in this world. How our choices are predetermined by the very environment that we face. Why would you take the stairs when there's an escalator right there? That's what the Center for Act Design is about. We are here to transform that notion. We work globally to advance design and operation strategies and research that fosters healthy and engaged communities. We are also the operator of Fitwell, which I'll talk about later. It is the leading healthy building certification system on the market. And we were actually launched by Michael Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York, as part of his administration. We sit at the nexus of public health research and the real estate industry, and we translate between those professions. We recognize that health is holistic. Physical, mental, and social health are conjoined. They are a complete state of being. It is impossible to think of one without thinking of all of them. As this Venn diagram displays, our health is intrinsically linked. We get a mental boost from physical activity. We know that our social supports can help us weather personal crises. And we know that a lack of social supports can take a bodily, physical toll. I often say here that the good news is that when we try to solve for any one of these things, we're likely solving for all of them. Also, the inverse is true. So why do we focus on health? As we know among this group, our health is on a negative trend line. Physical inactivity is a major risk factor for chronic or non-communicable diseases, as we learned yesterday. Inactivity is now comparable with smoking as a leading cause of death globally. And we know that obesity rates are skyrocketing across the globe. We also know that there's a global crisis of loneliness. And we know that landmark studies are highlighting the risk of social isolation and poor social relationships at a very, very global scale. Social isolation is directly linked to psychological and physiological outcomes, a 29% increase in incident coronary heart disease, and a 32% increase in stroke. We also know that trust is on the decline. These feelings are linked with our social isolation. We do not trust our neighbors as much. We do not trust our government institutions, our press institutions, our other institutions. And while this data specifically displayed on screen is from the United States, this is being documented in countries across the globe. We also know that COVID-19 made things significantly worse. We were already at a really fragile point. The pandemic introduced new waves of anxiety, new waves of depression. Statistically speaking, 4 of us in the room have felt some type of depression or anxiety exacerbated by the pandemic. So we know that health is top of mind. Okay, so why design? Because we know that we are simple creatures at our core, and our movements, our decisions, our behaviors are generally and greatly influenced by our surroundings. Let's look at this schoolyard in Brooklyn. I'm pleased to tell you that this is the before photo, but I'm less pleased to tell you that this was classified as a park in the city of New York. Can you imagine? Aside from it being technically separated from the streets by literal caging, can you imagine being a child trying to find joy in this space? Why would you choose to go to this grim park over just staying at home? Good design has the power to captivate and compel you, in addition to a total reimagining of how this space might be used. The designers use simple means, paints, artificial grass, and landscaping to create a truly meaningful place for the community. The dollars here were not extraordinary because the literal space already existed. Real estate is expensive, design does not have to be. Out of that thinking, the City of New York established the first ever active design guidelines, which was a real pioneering first in the world, the first time that public health evidence was recast as useful information to architects, engineers, designers, and planners. It provided a direct manual for how to create healthier buildings, streets, and urban spaces. And it really together brought lots of agencies, the Departments of Transportation, Health, Sanitation, Construction, and more to really break down government silos and work together comprehensively on a particular crisis, the obesity crisis. This really does reflect some of the guidelines that we saw yesterday in the presentation from Paris. There's a lot of overlap here in how we think about how to structure the guidelines in our everyday life. They focus on active transportation and active recreation by reclaiming the sidewalk, providing bicycle lanes, making sidewalks more enhancing, more compelling, more enticing, and creating more physical play spaces along those sidewalks. Also activating buildings by using stairs. Stairs is a big thing in active design. And also improving healthy food access. Now I want to share some examples of befores and afters in New York to give an idea of how these principles really manifested at the individual scale. I think a key notion of how active design works is the idea of testing an intervention before you fully commit to it. That is also a primary notion of placemaking. You don't have to invest fully without knowing the results. You gradually get there. And here's an example from Delancey Street. Here at this intersection at the Williamsburg Bridge in Lower Manhattan, a typical pedestrian would have to cross multiple lanes of traffic, a bicycle lane in the middle that you can't really see, all of this kind of interstitial pavement space. And this is a very highly populated area. So if you are not comfortable with the environment, if you are perhaps older or have mobility issues, this is a really intimidating place to cross. By narrowing the roadbed to cars, the city created a space for respite, a carve-out for pedestrian activity, and it also shortened the distance needed to travel to cross the busy road. And this was especially meaningful to us as an example because we know, according to the research, that perceptions of safety greatly hinder someone's ability to get out and walk. If they don't feel comfortable and safe walking in their environment, they will not. Or this typical scene in downtown Brooklyn as a before, on a low traffic volume road that primarily served as purely on-street parking, no real other function being given here. By reclaiming the street bed, this time the more permanent infrastructure created a place to program activity, a place for residents to socialize informally. This area is surrounded by courts, by office buildings. Prior to this, there was not a close-by, meaningful place for people to stop, take lunch, not sit at their desks, very American to sit at your desk. This provided a place for people to come out, socialize, perhaps strike up a conversation with a neighbor, and just be outside. It also was programmed in the evening hours. There's concerts, there's dancing festivals, there's just people hanging out in an area that was once the street. Or another grim scene from Queens. This is also a dense and otherwise vibrant area of the city. Particularly speaking, this area of Long Island City has over 10,000 inhabitants per square kilometer. It is a very dense environment that completely lacks any kind of significant open space. What it has in people, it lacks in parks. So why would we allow the car to reign supreme, especially in a city where half, or actually less than half of people even own a car in the first place? Today, subway riders and workers are greeted with the beautiful plaza, integrating seating, bicycle lanes, and social spaces to support more interaction, more traveling between home and work. And also, as an aside, this helps mitigate heat island effect and capture stormwater. So it's not as if this is purely addressing human health, it's also addressing the crises of climate. Or looking at a building, this is a classic mid-century library in New York, but this could be anywhere in the United States, probably even in Canada. Drab, low-density, suburban, car-oriented, this is New York, but looks like so many across the continent, like I mentioned. It's a bit of mystery what's going on inside. I guess it's a library, because it says it's a library. Here you see a railing being used as informal seating. The shrubbery's kind of overgrown, not very appealing. No welcoming signage, no community context, and certainly no celebration of purpose. This was a complete rebuild, and I think a brilliant one at that. It resituated itself on the lot, allowing more space on the sides to provide an exterior reading nook. It opens up the facade, allowing daylight to come in, views of nature. It sunk the stacks so that all of the actual neighborhood programming could be at the street level where people could see in and know what kinds of activities are going on. And I think most brilliantly, it represents the community. The word search is actually engraved in the etchings of the undulating wall in the over 40 languages spoken in the surrounding zip code. This is a library for the people of their neighborhood. These are the principles of active design, rethinking how a space can be used to benefit health. Daylight, greenery, interaction, walkability, access, agency. These are the key notions we advocate for. So since the launch of the active design guidelines in 2010, several things have happened. First, executive orders. The city made it law that any project receiving city funding would have to undergo an active design assessment. It is now part of the RFP process that if you want to move forward with your project with a select group of city designers and engineers, you must abide by active design principles. That same year, in 2014, the city passed a stairwell law that allowed the opening of stairwells to be much more visible, kind of overcoming the outdated thinking around fire codes. And also, zoning laws have been updated to require bicycle parking in all new construction. From that regulation, we've seen inspiration all over the globe. Just yesterday, I was so happy to hear about Paris's active design guidelines. We've seen examples bubble up from Sacramento, Miami, and actually codifying their guidelines, to people submitting to us how their projects across the globe are championing these ideas. Here you see pictured Pontevedra, Spain, Houston, China, Toronto. The top right corner is in Italy. It's taking off all over the globe. We also know in this time that the research is evolving, so we are too. I think we are increasingly at a point where we can definitively say what works and what doesn't work for cities. And I think even more importantly, we have to be thinking about just more than physical health. I think even the namesake of our organization, Active Design, should no longer imply just physical activity. It's about social activity, mental activity. We know that this spectrum of thinking is applied to each of us in our daily lives. And we are working to understand how these ideas of self-determination, sense of belonging, relationships, diversity, safety, civic engagement are all also being impacted by our surroundings. Here again, major change can happen with small interventions. We know that seating helps support physical activity that provides stopping point for those with mobility issues. But it also allows you just to take in the view and strike up a conversation with a neighbor. And we know that seating is a deterrent to getting out and walking around. We also know that signage can impact so many levels of trust. We know that if you have welcoming signage, you will feel engaged to come in, you will feel included, you will feel welcomed. There is that sense of agency that is bestowed to you if you don't have to stop and ask someone where I need to go. Imagine being a first-time user to any place and not knowing where to go. This signage not only can orient you to your surroundings, but also convey that sense to you that you are welcome to be there. We are happy to have you here. So what I want to last end with is that we have this kit of parts that can be applied at all scales, budgets, and localities. We have the data and we know the stats that can be applied to any project so that we can advocate for and rationalize the inclusion of these strategies. As I wrap up, I briefly want to mention Fitwell, which is our healthy building certification system. This is how we get governments, investors, and other stakeholders the information they need to adopt these strategies. This is really the offspring from the original active design guidelines and offers a playbook for decision makers on how to build more healthfully, more equitably, more sustainably, and more meaningfully. I think that one thing I would share out to this community is that as you move forward, you might want to consider coming up with some kind of framework that you can apply in your cities as you move forward, and even retroactively, that really touches on all of these measures, and this is certainly a starting point from my point of view. We also know that for those in the room who aren't moved by health as the major motivator, recent research out of MIT shows that buildings that are healthy certified actually garner 8% more in rent than their counterparts. So in summary, organizations like mine have the data and the evidence-based strategies to support transformative change in cities, in Olympic cities, past and present and future, and in all cities. I would love to connect with any of you at the end of this. I am over time by a minute, so I'm going to quickly walk away from the podium and hope that the next person's a bit faster than I am. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Bryan. I don't think anybody could have spoken faster than you did, because that was quite amazing. And thanks a lot. Really, really inspiring. And I think there are a lot of great topics that our next speaker will also address in some way. The next speaker is here from Copenhagen. And it's Rita Justesen, who's the head of planning and sustainability at Bryan Havn, which is a corporation for the development of the city and port of Copenhagen. And the city and port of Copenhagen, it's a corporation for development of the new city areas and for the port of Copenhagen, and also for the daily operations of the harbour. The city and port of Copenhagen is owned partly by the city of Copenhagen and partly by the Danish government through the Ministry of Transportation. And Rita, we're looking so much forward to you telling us about Copenhagen.
Thank you so much. What you see here is part of Copenhagen with the harbour located central in the city. Copenhagen has a population that increases. We are approximately 640,000 inhabitants, and all analysis says that the population will continue to increase. We are also a young population. We have many young families with small children in the city, and therefore it's also a very active city with a physical active population. Copenhagen is a venue for big events. Next year, Tour de France will start here in Copenhagen. But when we talk about a livable city, we think that all the organized sports in the public spaces, at promenades and green areas, etc., are the most important ones. Copenhagen people love to be outdoor. It's for fun, it's for exercise, but also if it is a serious meeting, if it can be outdoor, we want to do that. As you see here, Copenhagen has many green areas and blue spots, and for us they are very important for all the organized, informal, physical activities. And you could say, as we really want to be outdoors, stay outdoor, really loving it, also some even call the Copenhagen people the Latinos of Scandinavia. I think you will see that they are a bit right. For many years, the harbour of Copenhagen was a very busy commercial harbour. It isn't any longer. We cannot compete with bigger harbour cities. So instead, we are planning to bring the harbour into being the recreational blue heart of Copenhagen. So today we have 42 kilometers of promenades reserved for bicycles and pedestrians along the harbour and along our canals. New bridges also reserved for pedestrians and bicycles connect different sides of the city, so it's more intimate, shorter distances, and that really means a lot, and it also means that it gives room for recreational activities along the water. So here you see some examples from our harbor. People are sunbathing, they are swimming in the water, stand-up paddles, kayaks, canoes, many different kinds of exercise and physical activities. The water in the harbor of Copenhagen is very, very clean now. It wasn't when we had all the industries, it was very polluted, but now it has been cleaned up, and the city has built underground huge basins that help so the sewage water do not float into the harbor. And one thing is also that we have a lot of movement, a lot of waves in the water. It's also helping cleaning it up. So it's very much used for swimming and whatever, as you see here. For instance, one of the activities, one of the events is every summer we have a competition swimming around the national parliament. It's 2 kilometers, as you also see it here. So we have many users of the harbor and the recreational harbors. Many places for sailboats and motorboats. Many members of clubs for kayaks and canoes. Many people that use the dipping zones, the bath, harbor bath and bath zones, and many people using it in different ways. Another part of it is, even that it is clean now, we also want to higher the biodiversity. So this year we have made a partnership with WWF, and the goal is to increase the biodiversity of the water of the harbor of Copenhagen. Third thing we have done this summer is to lower down into the water 50 biohuts, or fish hotels, as we also call it. And that's only the beginning. So here you see dipping zones. That's for children, small children, a safe way of jumping into the water. We have free harbor baths during the harbor, and we have 7 what we call bathing zones. I'll come back to that. And then we also have more and more saunas that help us so it's also easy to jump into the water and take a swim in wintertime. More recreational activities, for instance, you can have parties in different ways by the water, at the water. Many people fishing, but also houseboats are also for us part of making the harbor recreational and active. Houseboats for students' homes, for instance, but also houseboats used as restaurants, hotels, etc. It's all part of activating the harbor. Along the harbor, we have several new neighborhoods, and one of them is the North Harbor. It's 200 hectares of reclaimed land. It's very flat. It has huge harbor basins. It was meant for big ships, and now we are developing it into a new neighborhood. Today, the population, we started in 2010. Today, the population is 3,500. When we have completed it all, there will be 40,000 people living in North Harbour and the same amount of workplaces. So it's a rather huge and ambitious project for a city of the size of Copenhagen. As you see it here, the first section has been built, and the master plan says closed blocks that protect from the wind. It's very windy with all the open sea surrounding the area, to optimize the sun, to reach the inner courtyards and the public spaces, And then we have promenades, again, promenades along the water, and we built new canals, intimate canals, narrow canals that connect the huge harbor basins. So we are doing an internal way of canals and waterways in Nordhavn. And also here we have the focus on have fun, outdoor fun, recreational activities, invite people to stay outdoor and use it in many ways. This area called Sandkaj, it's a 450 meters long wooden deck, 12 meters in the depth. Here you can have a picnic, here you can sunbath, whatever, open for everybody, open 24 hours a day. And what you see in front, which is connected, which is plugged to this wooden deck, is a floating activity house with changing rooms, meeting rooms, saunas again. And then we have one of these bathing zones defined by the yellow flood barriers, a very cheap way of making such a zone. You are not allowed to jump into the water all over the harbor because we still have harbor buses and canal tour boats and etc. So as you see, it's a very popular place, especially young people come from all over the city, and of course especially on the sunny days in summer. And they ride their bicycles to get there. A huge success, almost perhaps too much of a success. And therefore we are doing more and more of this kind. In the end, we hope that people will spread out in the harbor. Yeah. Again, you see this floating activity house. We succeeded in doing that because we got some economical help for some funds. That's very important when you want to do all these things. You can say we don't need to have it, but it's nice to have it. So sometimes we do partnerships also with funds on that. Another thing is the first parking house in Nordhavn. And the rooftop of the parking house called Lydos. It's an open-air exercise area and playground. It's like a public space just put onto the roof. It's open for everybody, it's for free, and it's open all day round and all year round. And part of it is these outdoor stairs, and as you see a picture of that, 2 outdoor staircases. And climbing those are very, very good exercise, I could tell you. Hopefully you have time to go out there and try all the exercises and the stairs. And you see here what it is like. Oh, I think I missed someone. Yeah, I forgot that. You see to the right in the picture. In 2019, we got a AOC awards for this roof here, and I have to say we are very glad that we have got that. Yeah. And the area, this side, this neighborhood, in general, we try to make local streets so they look more like public spaces than traditional streets for traffic. A lot of public spaces, etc. Doing furbishing all these so it invites to stay outdoor. And I said in the start that we have many green areas and blue spots in Copenhagen. So we have in Nordhavn. And here you see the total Nordhavn and the idea of green areas that is located along the blue areas, so to get synergy out of that. And the longer we get to the north, the bigger green areas. So now we are planning for new destinations that we want people to use the total area now. I talked about Sandkaj. We have Havn. It's a kind of a blue pocket park. We are transforming an old industrial building, a huge one, into a culture house, also with a lot of facilities for physical activities. And then at the north coast, we are developing for a new nature park and a beach. All in all, it's 40 hectares. Here you see the pocket park, and here you see drawings of this new nature park. We have just had a public hearing about that, and Copenhagen people discuss what is most important: wild nature with a high biodiversity, recreational activities, or sports facilities. We really have a lack of real sports facilities as football fields, etc. in the city. So of course we really want to have it all, but it's only 40 hectares, so we have to balance it. My words, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Rita, and still half a minute left. That's really good, so we're on time. And I'm sure you have also a lot of questions that you would like to ask our speakers. At the end, when they all three have presented, we are ready for questions and discussion. And since we are on time, almost, there will be time for that. So please start noting so we can have a discussion afterwards. And from Copenhagen, we will now be going to Montreal, and we're happy to welcome you, Denis, Director of Sports of the City of Montreal. Denis has been working in the sports field for the last 30 years for the local, regional and provincial levels. Before this position now is the Director of the Montreal Concordia Sports Commission and Program Director and Director of the Sports Quebec. And currently he's the Director of the Sports of the City of Montreal, in charge of the development of infrastructure and major sports events in Montreal. So, the third city, please.
Merci beaucoup. Je voudrais tout d'abord remercier les organisateurs de l'événement de m'avoir invité pour venir faire la présentation aujourd'hui. It's my pleasure to be here today to make the presentation for Montreal. So, it's been a last year and a half that's been quite crazy for everybody in our field, mostly in sports, physical activity, of course, opening, closing events, opening, closing sport facilities. So I was very, very happy to be here this week in Copenhagen. I took actually an overseas flight with a real plane, real people, dusted off my suit. And when I woke up yesterday morning before the session, a bit jet-lagged, I said, oh yeah, I've got to wear pants today because I won't be in a teleconference. So anyways, no more COVID jokes, I promise. So I'll do the presentation on Seo Montreal and hope you can have takeaways for you today. So the City of Montreal, I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's a 500 square kilometers territory. Population of 2 million for the greater Montreal area. Second most populous river island in the world. 120 cultural communities. And the largest French-speaking city in North America. I don't know if you've been to the last session, not the last session, but in 2017 we hosted the Smart City and Sport in Montreal. So by hand, who was there in 2017? Nice to see you again. And we were on top of that tower. For those of you who weren't there, the sessions were on top of the tower of the Montreal Stadium Olympic Stadium. So we hosted the 1976 Olympics, of course, as you know. Interesting fact, it's where Thomas Bach actually won his gold medal in fencing in 76. And we were rated #1 city in Canada for hosting sport events 2 years in a row. So we're very happy and proud about that. We're going to talk today about, yes, the whole spectrum of sports, high-level events, visibility for the city, but also grassroots. And we're trying to cover the whole spectrum of sport and physical activity, transforming our city through simple actions, not necessarily big actions, to promote active living every day. Montreal has adopted 5 strategies over the past years, starting in 2014 with the first sport and physical activity policy that was presented and promoted by our sport department. The second one was a master plan for sports facilities. I'll stop there because we have almost 500 sports facilities in the city of Montreal. How do you do a master plan for those amount of facilities? Like they say, the African proverb, if you want to eat an elephant, you cut it by pieces. So that's what we did. We actually did master plans on certain types of facilities, starting with ice rinks. That's where the need was the most high in terms of the defiance au niveau des installations sportives. The second master plan was aquatics. So we took aquatics, look at the why, the what, and the how that I learned yesterday of those installations. And the other strategies were adopted by City Council, but are larger and not promoted by our department, but are already linked, of course, in our strategy. Like all of you, we're investing in sports facilities, $500 million in the past 10 years. You see 2 examples here inside Stalker Stadium that won a lot of awards in North America and Canada for architecture. And the renewal of 2 ice rinks with historical background on one of the buildings, as you can see. We're very proud of our Olympic legacy. 90% of our installations are still used today by the population. The center photo here that you have is Saint-Claude Robillard, which is the largest sports center in Montreal that was used for the Olympics. We have 1 million entries per year at that facility. You have Centre Maurice Richard Arena, which is a short track speed skating, having competitions every day and training for our national team. The way we work in the city of Montreal is divided by 19 boroughs. So it's 19 separate offices, sport and leisure offices. I work in the city center, so it's centralized for the events and management of the budget mostly. So we go by RFP towards the boroughs. So they deposit projects to our department and we analyze them. First, to be in line with our strategies that I talked about earlier. So if they're in line, all these projects are scored with numbers and to evaluate their value to be in line with our strategies. The other criteria we're looking at for subsidies to the boroughs is their historical and geographical investment throughout time to be equitable around the city. We're also looking at social, economic, and environmental issues in those boroughs. And of course, we always have more projects than the budgets we have. So financial assistance for 270 projects in the last 10 years. Of course, access to water, we're an island, so we have a lot of work to do. We did a couple of good, build a couple of good facilities for access to water, 100 kilometers of public waterfront. We have a lot to learn from Copenhagen, of course. 2 eternal waves. If you get on that wave, it's made by the current. So you go by the shoreline, it's not with a boat, you go with a rope, and if you get on top of that wave, you can stay there forever. Well, at least until November. So you see here a couple of shorelines that we managed. Promoting urban sport, of course, for youth mostly, up-and-coming sports, trying to use facilities or areas that are not used for sports or other purposes. You can see here the bottom left picture at the Olympic Park, with a recent skate park that was built, having international competitions, having youth also participate in activities over there, and of course skateboarding, going to the Olympics helped build that facility. On the right is actually mountain climbing at Île Notre-Dame, which is a legacy from the 1967 World Exposition that was held in Montreal. And this is a man-made ice wall. Other examples of creative urban outdoor recreation facilities. You see a multi-purpose surface that is being used under an overpass for cars. So year-round use. Other access for winter sports you can see here. Of course, the winter experience is something else in Montreal. We've got a lot of variations in temperature. You could go like 20 degrees difference in 24 hours. So that's a big, big issue for having a problem with snow, problem with ice, of course, to maintain good conditions for sport practices. So active mobility, winter cycling, yes, you can get winter tires on your bike if you'd like. We're working on that. It's more and more popular. Cross-country skiing, 195 kilometers of groomed cross-country trails. 22 of those are on top of Mont Royal, which is the jewel of the city, big, huge park that's built in the center of the city. It's a natural mountain, and it's as big as Central Park. If you know Central Park in New York, it was actually designed by the same architect, Mr. Homestead. So 260 skating rinks to maintain. I hope that number won't go down with climate change. So it's always an issue. Another nice initiative are cycling education parks. With very low budget, you can actually design those parks either on a section of street that's closed or in a parking lot that's not used. So just spread paint, actually rebuild or try to simulate actually traffic cycling for youngsters for security, cycling ethics also to be learned very, very young, or just have fun with obstacles. Of course, we're very proud of the inclusiveness for the Seo Montreal. This event is major. Le Défi Sportif Altergo, which receive 8,000 athletes per edition, 25 countries actually for disabilities. So we're very proud of that event. It's almost as big as Paralympics, but not the same budget. Hosting major events, of course. Montreal is a very active city. You see the events we can get in Montreal. The picture on your right is the actually kayak canoe basin that is still used today for water sports. Other events, ATP Masters 1000 tennis tournament, the Tour de l'Île, which is the largest, one of the largest bike tours in Canada, and of course, World Figure Skating Championships in 2024. Looking in the future, creating active transportation. Of course, these numbers are very low compared to Copenhagen statistics, but for North America, we're quite proud of the 900 kilometers that we have for bike paths. Half of the bike paths are actually with snow removal for winter cycling. And we're putting together right now the Réseau Express Vélo, which is a high-capacity bike path. You can see in red the roads that have been transformed in those expressways for cycling. And of course, examples were taken here in Copenhagen for that to build those pathways. So, of course, self-serve big seat bikes, it's not very popular here in Copenhagen because everybody's got a bicycle, so it's not our case. So 9,000 self-serve bikes are available for citizens. 5.8 million rides in 21, sorry. Other great initiatives, quite recent also, trying to facilitate activity in the back alleys of Montreal, streets that are not used anymore, giving directly to houses. So green, white, you can see kind of arrangements that are being made to create, of course, a safe environment, involve citizens in the building of those facilities, and also avoid transportation if you have it in your backyard. Other innovative for physical transportation is the Mill Montreal project, which is create an evolving living transportation with also water squares, resilient landscape. So this is a quite new project that we've put together. You can look it up online. Two other examples in innovation is the Place des Montréalaises, which is the picture on your right. You can see the great big triangle there. So construction will start in 2022. This will be built in honor of 14 women that lost their lives in a mass shooting in '89. The Polytechnic, probably you heard of that. So, and other 7 great women that helped the city of Montreal in their history and build the city we know today. So user-friendly mobility, this will permit people to go from one part of the city to another over a quite busy boulevard that was there. It was an obstacle for pedestrians. Quality urban design, of course, year-round use, and you have another ice rink that is going to be built in Montreal in the next few years. So innovative to live together, I think the conclusion would be that urban health, redesigning our cities, I think that's what we heard like the last 48 hours. Everybody's going on the same pathway, so that's rejoicing. The other thing is 50% of the world's population live in urban areas. So we need to address those issues with those people are often less physically active than the people that live in the countryside, of course. So we've created also, it's quite new, a Center for Excellence in Urban Health. And I'm doing the promotion also for a conference that is going to be held in Montreal in May next year, 2022, to promote policies for health, well-being, and equity. Merci. Thank you. Tak.
Well, thanks a lot. Now we've heard from the 2 big cities and our own small city here. Normally we think we come from quite a big city, but we must admit that, that we're the small one here. But very inspiring to hear from all the 3 of you. And we have a little bit of time for questions, so I would want to hear if there are any questions from you. Yes, there's one here. I think there's a microphone coming up.
Thank you very much for 3 very inspiring presentations. I have a question for Montreal. I still have some very good memories from 1976 Olympics, where I took part as a spectator. I had hoped to take part as an athlete, but missed 1,500 meters by a few seconds, so I had to buy the tickets to go there. But it was still a very good experience. But my question is that we all, or I suppose all older people here, remember that it was a very big financial problem with the Olympics, and Montreal had some very big economic issues in the years after that. And I would like to ask, does that affect the willingness of the people of Montreal to invest in sports facilities? That they had such a bad experience with the financial situation back in '76?
Yeah, very good question. Of course, the Olympic Stadium has a long history of up and downs. It is still used today for events. We actually have our sport institute that has been built within the stadium for 6 national teams. It's been used for now. For major events, it's much more complicated. For the financing of the infrastructure or the maintenance, we can thank the smokers in Quebec for tax on tobacco. So that's the way that we paid all the debts from that stadium. So it was not very loved in it's gaining popularity, the Olympic Stadium, of course. It's an icon still for the city.
Another question down here.
I have a question for Bryan, or possibly from Copenhagen. I noticed in New York City you took busy streets and narrowed them down to 1 or 2 lanes. I'm assuming, and as well here in Copenhagen, where you've done away with car bridges being built and put in bike bridges, I'm assuming that is to push people to public transportation. And I'm assuming that's the goal, because otherwise, where did the cars go and how well has that worked? If either of you could speak to that.
I can start by saying that it is actually a phenomenon in urban planning that reducing travel lanes actually decreases the number of cars on the road. It is just this magical thing that happens in time and time again in cities across the globe. It's a really complicated philosophy that I think I probably will spare you. We can talk about it afterward, but we don't see complications from adding bicycle or additional sidewalk lanes. That traffic either finds another route or they're motivated to take another mode.
So in other words, if it becomes easier to ride a bike or ride a bus, that's what they do instead of taking a car.
And I think importantly, for those who must ride in a car, that travel also becomes better because there are fewer cars on the road as a result too.
Here in Copenhagen, we are building a new metro system. The first lines opened in 2002. Last year opened a city ring that connects all parts of the existing city, and North Harbour has the first part of a lane with 2 stations. So that's a way to give Copenhagen a high-class public transport system in combination with bicycles. And Copenhagen people, they use their bikes every day, all year round. So, but a new initiative from the local politicians is that they now talk about car-free neighborhoods, and they have decided that the rest of North Harbour shall be private car-free neighborhood. We do not know how we shall do that, and we are not sure that the city is ready for not having cars. Copenhagen people do not use their cars that much in their everyday time, but they want to have the car for weekends and holidays, whatever. So we have a new challenge to find out how to make car-free neighborhoods.
If I could also add, our delegation got around and we've walked, we've biked, we've taken your metro, we've seen your harbor taxis, we've taken your boats. Very impressive, and you should be congratulated. And thank you for such a nice stay here in your city.
And I think there's a question more here.
Thank you. Based on what Rita shared, I was wondering from the other panelists, what is the most exciting new trend or idea or vision you see in the future when it comes to urban or active design, either from your cities or around the world?
I'll go first. I think what you just discussed about creating car-free environments has a lot of potential. I think that the rethinking around what an automobile is, especially around automated automobiles, is kind of a scary discussion. We know that a moving vehicle down a road, is whether a person's driving it or not, is an obstacle, is inherently unsafe for all other modes of travel. And I think that the more we can create these kinds of environments where you do not need a car for your everyday life, perhaps there is a depository of readily available cars at the periphery that you go and pick up should you want to travel outside of the city, but just not minimizing the need for that on the everyday is, I think, very exciting. And hearing that places that have trailblazed for so long are considering that opportunity, I mean, that's leading the way for other cities like New York, like Montreal, I'm sure, for us to emulate and find similar success in.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I could just add to that. Maybe it's cliche what I'm going to say, but just have access to nature. This is, I think, the most work we have to do is just get those kids out, get them accustomed to contact with nature, we don't do that enough. So I think that's where we're going in our green spaces.
And as I mentioned to my last slide, a very huge discussion here in Copenhagen these days is, should it be wild nature, should the focus be on high biodiversity, or should it be on recreational activities, healthy exercise, fun, whatever. It's really a huge thing. And we tried to balance it when we develop new areas, but in fact we have got many critics this year here for the last 12 months or something.
So I think that was the last of the discussions that we had today. So thank you very much.
Thank Katia for the timely and diligent moderation, that you demonstrated, clearly in this session, connecting the dots. Let me say this, everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. It's a way to conduct science, and it was said by Albert Einstein, who basically, revolutionized science with the theory of relativity, but it's also a way of which, an advice in two ways. One way on how to conduct science-based policy making, and we learn a lot by different hearing, different experience and example, but it's also a recommendation to me on how not to complicate your life. I will not do the wrap-up. I hope in this way, the inspiration that you collected here will remain personal. Let me say, that to me, the Smart Cities and Sport Summit and Copenhagen 2021 has been a revelation, an epiphany, and a revolution, starting from Paris 2024, ending with Copenhagen 2021, but we'll look at the future. Let me say I've learned a lot, so let me thank again the speakers, the participants, and the inspiration that came from Smart Cities and Sport and Copenhagen. Let me thank the partners that you see over here. The local partners were the City of Copenhagen, Wonderful Copenhagen, the Danish National Olympic Committee, and Sport Event Denmark. Let me thank in particular the institutional partner, and in particular the City of Lausanne, the Canton Vaud, and the IOC. Let me also thank you for the freedom that I've got in being the Master of Ceremony, for your tolerance, for your patience. It was my first time. I almost ended my quotes. So, no. I'm promising you, I'm not too sure there will be a second time, but let me say this, to end, I think, again, science-based policy learning, and we've all been gathered here in order to learn, share, and connect, as the philosophy of Smart Cities and Sport did. We need to move forward, we need to keep a balance, and life is riding a bicycle, of course, and it's good to say it here in Copenhagen. The big question is really, is the window of opportunity of COVID and the crisis closing? Of course, Winston Churchill said it first, never let a good crisis go to waste. And it was repeated again, crisis after crisis. This time we need to make the difference, because if it's true, as in the last financial crisis in 2007-8, Rahm Emanuel, head chief of staff of the Obama administration, said that the crisis basically opens and amplifies the realm of the possible. We need to do something. This, you see it here, just two images of something that I normally do, as an ambassador of the Global Sport Innovation Center powered by Microsoft, but I will not quote it. Let me say this before we come to the housekeeping, so you keep your attention on the housekeeping. And the last thing, the last quote I'm going to leave you with is by a great First Lady, the First Lady of the wife of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, but mostly the First Lady of the world, she has been defined by many. first chair of the United Nations Commission on Human Rights, oversaw the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. I think we dreamt here. We need to believe in the beauty of their dreams, and we need to build a better tomorrow. So let me thank you all. Let me wish you, to see you next year in Lausanne, the Olympic capital. It will be, again, as Marisa Loire said, a special event, because every event is special, every Olympic game is special, but also every Smart Cities and Sports Summit is special. In terms of housekeeping, let me say that there will be a session at 1:45, building the good cases, when we will hear, cases from Denmark, and you will see them in the app, the names of the best practices that were brought here. For those of you who are leaving to Lillehammer, there is a transfer by bus at 1, so don't be late. It's going to be outside here, transfer by bus at 1 for those leaving to Lillehammer. Tomorrow, there will be a visit to Copenhagen at 9 a.m. in the hotels, leaving at the 9 a.m. in the hotel. And that's really it. So thanks again. A round of applause, to you all. And tack.